Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Raw Reaction preview show, the show in which we look at the game that Arsenal will be playing tomorrow. And that is a redemption fixture as it's being touted against Brighton and Hove Albion at the Amex Arena. Now, this is a really important game as you look ahead at the rest of the season, thinking we had our game in hand, we had a chance to claw back some points in the race for top 6, top 4, whatever you want to call it, and whatever your ambition is. And we didn't manage to do that against Manchester City, obviously. We broke that all down in both our Raw Reaction show and the podcast yesterday with Drew, Lee Judges, and John, which is still available. Make sure you go out and check that and listen to it before you tune into this one. But if you are sitting here knowing that you've listened to that and now you're listening to the preview, I think we can all agree that Arsenal definitely need to put in a much, much more accomplished, mature performance than we saw against Manchester City. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of changes that are going to need to be made by Arteta. There's going to be some really tough decisions. And we're going to go through some of those, plus how I feel Arsenal should line up, and get your predictions and my predictions and everything else. And obviously, talk to you guys in the chat box as well. Thank you ever so much, Mr. J, one of our members, for tuning in. Today, gone tomorrow, says Avon. For those that were listening to the podcast yesterday, there was some comedy in there from one of our listeners. I'm not going to reveal it because if you know, you know. And if you don't know, go listen to the podcast and find out. But I am having a haircut at some point, hopefully a very within my bubble haircut to be following by guidelines. So the hair will be released at some point. But you can just see how long this is at the sides. This needs complete trimming. Rodney says, the doom and gloom continues. Can we at least see Tom's hair today? No, Rodney, you can't. Hello, Joseph. Hello, Obar. Hello, Sergio, and some more of you as well. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. So let's talk about it then. Brighton Hove Albion. I'm going to kick straight off with my lineup for the game, of how I think we should be lining up. So you can see on the screen now what I've gone for. I'm just going to get rid of that banner at the bottom of the screen so you can see the whole thing. There we go. So, Leno in goal. To start off with, he was easily the best Arsenal player on the pitch against Manchester City. Pulled off 9 saves, I believe it was. And I just think that every time I see him play, I just think, why would you want to continue being a goalkeeper for Arsenal at this? You get no backup from your centre-backs, no backup from your defence. Some people might turn around and say, yes, it's his job. But that's just it's unbelievable how much he has to do in these games. So let's have a look at what I've gone for. Now, the first thing, Dean Bevan in the chat says, afternoon, Tom, would like to see Saka and Tierney on the left again. Now, one of the things that I have left out is Bukayo Saka. I don't think he had a lot of luck in the game against Manchester City. I also think that it's very important that you don't overwork players during this period. And if you've got opportunities to swap players out, we've just come back from 3 months off. Players do need change. Now, there is still a change in here that you're going to see that hasn't changed. And that is Aubameyang, and that's purely for the fact that he's just too important in our lineup. However, I've kept the 2 fullbacks as well, Bellerin, because we've not heard anything from Cedric. Otherwise, I think Cedric might actually have an injury facially that's keeping him out. He was hit by a ball in football, but apparently that's kept him out. That's what I heard from commentary yesterday. Centre-backs, Mustafi and Holding. Obviously, I didn't pick either of these 2 in my last lineup, but Mustafi was picked against Man City, and he did okay. I don't think you can put too many issues on Mustafi in the Manchester City game whatsoever. Holding comes in because supposedly he is fit and ready to go. Socrates, I can't pick. I probably would pick Socrates over Holding, but there's a bigger question mark over Socrates than there is Holding right now. David Ornstein actually tweeted out that he would have that he thinks that Holding will be in contention for Saturday's game. I've continued with Tierney at left back. I thought he did quite well. There were a couple of times he made a couple of errors and let Sterling get him behind, but overall I thought he was okay. That back 4 for me is fine for this game. I haven't got too much more to say there. I think the biggest talking points come around the midfield, because with Granit Xhaka being injured, it is a big loss. And it doesn't matter what your opinion of Granit Xhaka is, whether it's positive or negative, he is one of our better midfielders. And I say this time and time again, that he's one of our better midfielders because we simply lack quality in the midfield. It's not necessarily a compliment to the Swiss man. It's just because we lack a lot of quality in the midfield. And so I've gone for a combination of Guendouzi and Mainsley because I just think that if you have a pivot of Guendouzi and Ceballos, it just doesn't quite work defensively. There's so many spaces to manipulate and use and take advantage of. And I just think if you put Mainsley in there as well, who's more defensive minded as well, it adds a little bit more solidity. And I like the fact that Mainsley, obviously Ainsley Maitland-Niles, we call him Mainsley here on the channel. Mainsley is, for me, someone that can add a little bit more speed to a defensive position, a little bit more agility and balance than what you usually get from the likes of Xhaka, can actually recover that position a lot better than what Xhaka would be able to. So with the technical ability that you've got there, I think that's a decent pivot. I want to see Ceballos not in a number 10 role. And I know it looks like I've placed him in a number 10 role, but all I'm showing you here, really, this is a 4-3-3. It's just Ceballos is the most advanced of those three. And I think that the fact when he came on, he was carrying the ball so well. But the thing is, he was doing that from really, really deep because of the pivot position that he was playing. I'd like to give him the opportunity to be a ball carrier further up the team, personally. You'll notice that there's no Ozil. If you listened and you watched the podcast yesterday, we broke a couple of comments down. We didn't get into loads of detail, but effectively, Arteta wants to bring Ozil into the side when he feels he's at his best. And at the moment, he doesn't feel that that is the case. I don't expect to see Ozil start or play. If he does, it's a massive turnaround from what we saw with comments from the Manchester City game. And that's why I've gone personally with Ceballos. I don't think Willock really had any impact on the Manchester City game whatsoever. And maybe it was a mistake on my part to include him last time. I thought he might come back better, but he really didn't have much of an impact. And maybe it's probably the best idea to rest him. Then we come to the front three. I've already mentioned Aubameyang. I think Aubameyang just has to start. He's club captain. He's the best player in our team. Without him in the team, we don't have anywhere near as much chance of scoring than if he does. That does mean that Lacazette obviously doesn't get a start here. I actually feel that Aubameyang will probably start on the left and Lacazette up top. I think that's probably what Arteta will go for, but I'd rather see the energy of Martinelli on the left and Pepe on the right. We're not playing a counter-attacking style against Brighton. I'd like to see us play with these inverted wingers. I think the inverted sort of wingers against Manchester City was a mistake. I feel that the way that they had to cut back a lot slowed us down on the counter. But actually, playing against Brighton when you're often going to dominate possession, having inverted wingers is probably, for me, the best idea about that. Let's get some of your comments and reactions then to what I've gone for. I think there may be some controversial things, but other than that, I think that's a perfectly reasonable lineup. So let's see what you're saying. Krish KR7, that's probably our best lineup right now. Dean Bevan says would like to see Ozil tried in a deeper midfield role. I don't know what you'd get because he wouldn't give you the commitment going backwards that you'd need. I get what you're trying to say, a Santi Cazorla-esque technical player that's a ball carrier, but I think you have that in Ceballos, actually. Omar says, Mainsley has been terrible in midfield. I'll go with Ceballos and Guendouzi at the base. Interesting. Who would you go for in the midfield alongside them then, Omar? Avon says, Mainsley, Ceballos as a pivot might work with Guendouzi or Saka pushed on might work. But I think Willock, despite a lot of criticism, did exactly what Arteta wanted against City. And maybe maybe I missed something, Avon, that Willock was doing. I just didn't feel like he had that much of an influence beyond running on the game, especially on the ball. I didn't really see what he brought to it in that position. Tivo says, great lineup. Thank you, mate. Glad you agree with it. Rodney says, Brighton haven't won a game all 2020, by the way. So no pressure, Arsenal. And also Arsenal, I don't think have picked up a win against Brighton in the last 4 attempts. I think we've drawn 2 and lost 2. If that's just off the top of my head, it might be wrong. I'm pretty sure we've not won our last 4 fixtures in the league against Brighton or in all competitions, one of the two. So it's whilst they've not won and they're on terrible, terrible form, we don't know how teams are going to come back off this break. I don't think you can really make too much of a judgment about Arsenal and how they're returning from the break in the game against Man City, besides fitness and the risk of injuries. That is clearly apparent. And something else that I read today on Football London, actually, that supposedly there's a rule that William Saliba could actually make an appearance this season because of exceptional circumstances. If Arsenal were to, say, get a fair few injuries in the centre-back position, it could actually mean that Arteta has given the exceptional circumstances to bring him in. Much like when Barcelona were given those circumstances in La Liga to sign Martin Braithwaite so horribly from Leganes. But that type of sort of exception to the rule situation where injuries dictate, that happens. I don't know how much credit there is in that story. I'd love if it was true and we could bring Saliba in from extra backup, although I don't want to see so much pressure put on the lad. But any reinforcements is much, much more kindly welcomed by me. Dean follows this. Leo come up by saying we should go for Eduardo Camavinga. I don't actually know too much about the guy. I believe he's playing in Liga. I might be wrong. Maybe someone to do some research on. Joseph Masako, replying to Omar, says one game in like 30 years is your best position. Isn't enough to establish consistency, especially when people are trying to convert you into something else that isn't your main skill set. I think we're talking about Mainsley there. And yeah, you do need consistency to develop, but sometimes revelations happen. Sometimes a player could be playing at the beginning of their career in one role, they move into one role, another role for another game, and they explode onto the scene. It's possibly a risk I think that's probably worth taking against Brighton. This season for me it's really difficult to sort of think that anything's going to come of it, and maybe doing some experimentations and seeing the players that ultimately Arteta would like to keep at the club, giving them those opportunities to play, like Maitland-Niles, like Guendouzi, these youngsters like Saka, Willock, etc., is probably the best way to approach the end of the season. I'd like us to compete. I really, really would. I just can't, with a level head on, I just cannot see how we will do that. Karen Russell, long-time listener and one of our fantastic members, says, just read about that Saliba on Twitter. Good news if true. Yeah, it would be really good news if we could bring him in, but I don't think it will happen. It would have to be really exceptional circumstances. There'd have to be a lot of injuries, I reckon, before they gave it the okay. Mark Hernandez, hello, welcome to the chat, mate. Socially Outcasted, thank you so much for tuning in. Joseph Mayers, please correct me. I'm so sorry, Joe. I don't think Saliba can play this season. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Please do go some research on it, guys, because it's an interesting read on Football London. Speaking of which, and this is a little selfish plug, I did put out a tweet earlier today that I've had an article released on Marcos Senna, looking back at the fantastic, brilliant-born Spaniard's career, what he did for Villarreal and the Spanish national team. I'll leave a link to it in the description. If you're watching on playback, and if you're watching live, obviously you can click on the video again after it's finished and it will be there, I promise. So make sure you give that a read. Really, really appreciate that. But that's going to bring the preview show to a close. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, people. Really, really appreciate it. I'm hoping this is going to get a bit of a cut and maybe you'll see the locks dispersed on a Raw Reaction show tomorrow, straight after the game. So please make sure, there you go, Tom's here, isn't he? Tom, let me out. So please make sure you do tune in after the game, turn those notifications on, join us straight after the match tomorrow. Let's get a reaction. Let's hopefully see a much, much more positive reaction than what we saw against Manchester City. Please drop a like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Turn those notifications on. Click on the article in the description after this has finished being going out live. So if you're watching on playback, you can get it straight away. But other than that, it's been a real pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the rest of your afternoon and tomorrow morning leading up to the game. And I hope you enjoy it as much as these Arsenal players need to win it. See you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.